All right, I'm with Katrina Wybrow today from Wybrow Associates. How are you, Katrina?
I'm good, thank you, Tony. Thank you for coming today.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Look, I wanted to talk about inheritance because I've come across quite a few people lately who have had a financial windfall, we could probably say, where they've actually had either an inheritance or come into quite a lot of money. And I'm just wondering how that would actually fit with a financial advisor and sort of the type of work that you do. Is that the type of person that you would be able to help, and if so, how?
Look, that is the sort of person I can help, and we are seeing more and more people that are receiving large inheritances, and contrary to what most people think, it doesn't take away all your problems. I like to say to people, you just have newer and more interesting problems. And particularly I find that it causes a lot of concern to people because usually they've got this inheritance from loved ones.
Sure.
So they've had the trauma of someone passing away and often illness prior to that. And then they inherit this sudden wealth that they haven't had the skills to generate. They don't have the trusted advisors around them to advise them that perhaps that their parents or their aunt or their uncle or whomsoever had to help them. And so they don't want to be the generation that loses that money. So there's often an anxiety behind that. They don't really have the concepts around what it will do for them. Sometimes they're even quite unclear about what they want it to do for them.
Sure.
So what we actually do is we have a series of conversations to help people get really clear about what they want to get out of it. Now, I know this sounds nothing to do with finances, but it's everything to do with finances because I always like to say to people, the things we need to think about are quite fundamental. How do you live? Who do you love? And what legacy do you want to leave?
I guess that depends on the individual. Like, some people want that money to be invested, whereas others are more looking at building that legacy for their family in other ways. So how do you sort of find out what it is that they actually want from that money?
Well, in these series of conversations, what it really is honing down what their values are and what they want to get out of it. And pretty quickly, for most people, if they have children, they do want the children to benefit from the benefit that they have had from their parents or their auntie or their uncle or whomsoever it's been that's left the money. So that is often one of the first places we start, is to actually do an estate planning exercise for them. Now, necessarily, we're often dealing with younger children, certainly not adults usually. And so we look at a raft of things in order to bring that to fruition. So I deal with a number of estate planning lawyers, and if that's the place we need to start, and this will be client directed via the conversations we have, then that's where we start, where we set up, if you like, an estate plan at the very beginning, which will then tell us what structures we need to invest through to deliver the result that the client wants. So that is very much, if you like, where we begin with what is important to the client and what they're looking for and the things that keep them up at night and how do we deal with that. Now, because I deal in this area a lot, I know, if you like, who the appropriate people are to deal with. And appropriateness comes down to the skill of the lawyer involved, what their specialty is, and also the size of the portfolio. If you're inheriting a $5 or $6 million portfolio, it may be quite appropriate to spend a significant amount of money, such as $12,000, to have a proper estate plan and in place and all the structures. Things that take account of marital breakdown. I mean, if you have young children, you don't know who they're going to partner with and how that may play out. So you may be very concerned about keeping the money in the family for future generations.
Right.
So we can, if you like, encompass those concerns in what we do. Once we have the structures in place, that will necessarily do a lot of the work in keeping the investments housed. For instance, testamentary trusts simply a clause in the will. But what it means is if you have minor children, they can receive money from your estate and be taxed as adults.
Okay.
Now, I had a client in the last couple of years where this has saved the client $12,000 in tax every year, each and every year that his children are minors.
Right.
And this will care for their maintenance and upkeep. It will pay for education. So he has secured his family's future through this simple mechanism. The other thing that was quite important is those children, whether their parents are on the planet or not, now have their whole futures taken care of. And there are a number of things we put in place for those. But appropriateness is very important. For instance, you might see a lawyer and they might hold themselves out to be an estate planner, but they may actually be a litigator,
Right.
which if the dispute happens around the estate may be highly valuable in that circumstance, but may not be appropriate if you're actually wanting to structure an estate. So knowing what's appropriate and who the people are to go to, and establishing good working relationships with those people are very important. And one of the things when people inherit money is there's a sense of overwhelm about what now, what first. So we look at things that are urgent and important, and if you like, start a shopping list of things that need to happen in our experience.
A lot of people I know, when they have a loss of a loved one or a family member, they tend to, the will is then dealt with by the accountant. They may go and see their accountant or someone as a part of that, or a local lawyer. How do we change that sort of, approach where they come and actually see someone like yourself to get, because from what you said, you've got a team of advisors around you who are experts in dealing with large sums of money and making sure that that's getting to the goals that people want. So how do we get people to sort of change from going to their natural default, what they think they should do, rather than coming to a financial advisor?
Well, I think you've also got to get the right financial advisor, because just like lawyers and accountants do many different things, financial advisors have a very wide range of things that they do. This is an area I specialise in. I'm used to dealing with estates. I'm used to working with lawyers and accountants in a collegiate way, because this knowledge does not reside with one person, and anybody who holds that out probably isn't across all the issues deeply, because I would never take on an estate without consulting the lawyer, without having a good accountant on board. And there may be other people necessarily that we may need to include as part of that process. Some estates are very complicated.
So you're more than just a financial advisor, hey? Yeah.
Well, financial advice to me is a holistic area. It is covering all the issues, and where you don't have the expertise, it's a bit like a GP. A GP is across a person's health, but they may send someone to a cardiac surgeon, they may send somebody to a dietitian, they may send somebody off to a physiotherapist. I'm the same. I have an overarching speciality, but when we have a very highly specialist area, I will call in those experts that I see need to deal with that particular issue.
Is there a critical time frame between, someone passing away and the estate and the will and everything all being processed to when they should come and see you?
Look, I think as soon as people know that they've got an inheritance and that they're going to receive it is when they should engage me, because a lot can go wrong. Mostly it doesn't, but it is really, I think, important to seek advice. Also, I think something that I will mention that I see more of is contested estates. Now, it can cost up to $45,000 for a couple of weeks in court to contest an estate.
Wow.
So again, it pays to get advice about appropriateness again.
And you can help in that area?
Absolutely, because, we might choose mediation, we might go to a litigator, there might have been adequate family provisions. I mean, for instance, these days you can't just decide, well, I don't like the black sheep in the family, I'm not going to leave this black sheep child anything in my will, because what you're really setting up is a will that's contestable.
Sure.
Now, is that really what you want your legacy to be?
We've talked about windfalls from inheritance and how we can protect all that, but people win lotto too. So is that an area that you could give guidance on?
Well, I've actually had one lottery winner and one lotto winner. And this has been a very interesting exercise,
right,
because you hear stories in the media about how people have gone and blown the money and they're
absolutely
worse off. And we were actually talking about this prior to the interview.
Is that the same approach you use in that situation to an inheritance from an estate? Or
I always advise people to be discreet about what they have, because I think it's only your business and your trusted advisors. And I think it's very important. I mean, discretion is the soul of our business, really, and it's nobody else's concern. And who you choose to love and help and leave a legacy to is a very personal business.
Yeah.
So I would always say, quietly help who you wish to.
You mentioned before discretion is important, and you encourage discretion with your clients if they have a financial windfall. What makes a good financial advisor, in your opinion? Because you are a financial advisor, so how do we know who's a good one and who's one that may not be so good?
Well, I always think how people start a conversation is very important. People come to speak about money, but money is really literally currency. We put a lot of emotional energy into making money, so it is imbued with a lot of emotion necessarily. I always say to people, what do you want this to do for you? What was your burning question that brought you here? Because people will have a burning question. They will have something that is non-negotiable for them that they have to deal with, or something they wish to address. So I really think it's the quality of the conversations to unpack these things. Then investing the money, I always think, once you have the structures in place, is then about responding to the current economic climate. Because at the moment we're in a very low inflation, low return environment. That will necessarily dictate different sorts of investments that perhaps we had in the higher inflation times, with perhaps higher earnings. The world is a very different place, and that's a constantly evolving situation that we also need to not just be responsive to, but anticipate, because you can see economic factors at play, and you do need to be able to structure a portfolio to go through those times and still deliver what the client's objectives are. So I think anybody who speaks about your goals, your objectives, what you want to get, you're probably sitting with the right person. If they're involving other specialists and you have a large sum of money, they're probably the right person.
So how do you manage the ongoing sort of estate or the administration of the estate? Or is it a one-off consultation where you set them in the right direction? What's the relationship with you as their advisor moving forward? Obviously, it's a longer-term thing, I'd assume.
Yes, it is, because complex large estates need ongoing care and maintenance. And in fact, this is one of the things I often see when people first come to me. That portfolio is often not what it should be, because the person that made the bequest can often be ill for a number of years before they pass away. So things they would have attended to assiduously over the course of their lives, things lapse, things let go. There's not the care and attention. So initially there'll be a lot of work to do, and a lot of care and attention that will need to be put into that portfolio. And that we look after the ongoing management of that portfolio. Usually people will have a review, sometimes 4 times a year, sometimes twice a year. Everybody has a different time frame. And when you have a bigger portfolio, there are ad hoc things that necessarily happen that have to be attended to outside the review cycle.
How do you separate the emotion out of the sort of the right financial decision making for people? Because obviously dealing with inheritance and they've had a loss in their family, obviously. How do you sort of try and get past that emotional decision versus what's the right financial decision?
Well, again, I'm a great believer in values-based conversations. if you ever can't think what is the right thing to do in this situation, I think you just always need to go back. What are your core values? What do you believe in? What do you want to be a deliverable? And then measure every decision against that. Because really, in our lives, our core values don't really change that much. Who we are as people and what we believe and how we hold that to be true tends to stay with us over the course of our lives. So I always think thoroughly discuss everything and then have a values-based conversation and measure every decision against your values.
All right, Katrina, who should come and see you? Like, when does it make sense for somebody to get an inheritance and come and see you? You know, obviously, I assume we're not talking someone who gets $50,000 or anything like that. Like, what's the right inheritance amount to get proper advice that you're offering and to get the structures in place?
Well, I think to have structures in place, you probably need about $1 million.
Yep.
If you received $500,000, you might have a different thought process around what you might do. And it also depends on what life stage you're at as well. Now, obviously, someone who's young, who doesn't have a home, I would seriously get them to consider, should we be buying a home? Because once you have shelter, that's one of the big jobs in your life completed, really.
Yep.
And I think that having a home is very important. Not all financial advisors think that. I mean, some people think you should have an investment portfolio and then at some later stage when you're more well-resourced financially, go and buy a house. I'm not one of those people because I think in retirement you certainly cannot pay market rent.
What would you say would be the first step in someone who wants to get some help with, come across some money? What's the first thing they need to do?
Well, generally the way I like to work is people contact us and I like to send them out a fact find that they can fill in because we charge for the first interview. So I like to review the information before people come in because if they come in and they're not prepared, I'll say, and so what is this worth? What debt do you have here? What is your car worth? What have you got in the bank? What's your superannuation? Where is it held? And people won't have that information to hand. So I always say that it uses the best use of the client's time and money to fill in that fact find, send it back to me. If there's anything missing or that I want to delve into deeper, I can ask for that prior to the interview. I read that before the interview. I do some numbers around that before the interview. I give it consideration. I always say to people, the interview actually starts when I get that back and I start reading it because I'm already thinking about you, I'm already considering your situation, and I'm thinking about ways that I can add value to you.
And is that fact find something you email out or is that available off your website?
No, we email that out.
Right.
It's necessarily quite long because it encompasses a universal situation. So I say to people, if you think I don't understand this or I don't think it relates to me, you are most probably right. I do like to have a discussion over the phone with clients. I want to make sure that they're realistic about what we can deliver for them.
Sure.
I don't really want people coming to see me and paying money for something where I can't add value.
Definitely. Yep.
It's a waste of their time and money, and I think it leaves a sense of dissatisfaction.
All right, Katrina. Look, thank you very much for that. Very insightful. Any final sort of, I guess, tips or advice for anyone who may sort of be coming into some inheritance or has won lotto on what they should be doing, like, or any final tips for them?
Look, I would say always seek advice. Always seek advice, because the same thinking that got you where you are is going to be the thinking that resolves the issues.
Sure.
And I didn't think of that. Someone far cleverer than me thought of that. But it's quite true. You need to, if you like, engage people that have been through this process many times before and they know the kind of issues that you're going to have to deal with before you even deal with them. So to me, it's critically important to engage trusted professionals to look after you. Usually the people that built that wealth had those people in place, but you don't have the opportunity of growing. You've just arrived where they finished.
Absolutely.
So you really need to get really good advice.
Excellent. Katrina Wybrow, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony.